Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. I think,
So,
like we were talking about last time, we were going to talk about the people complaining about Games Workshop raising their
yeah, yeah.
prices.
So let's address that real quick then. Okay, let's address that real quick because then I want to talk about I want to ask you guys your opinions on the reveal stuff that came out with the Super Bowl with, of course, Moon Knight and Doctor Strange and all that because I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys about that and see what
Mm.
you thought of that and the Lord of the Rings and stuff because I wanted to see what you thought about that. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty much like everybody else as far as the Lord of the Rings stuff goes. But I wanted to see what you guys thought.
Okay.
So, all right. So, in a nutshell, why do they raise prices, and why would they rotate the models that they put out?
Oops.
Well, this is the norm. When I worked there, this was the normal thing to do. The two things you could count on with Games Workshop were both of those things. For one thing, the range is a large range. I mean, they offer more figures than any other company,
Yeah,
really.
the only people that might have a range that comes close to it would be like Rao Partha or something like that.
Right.
Which,
I
Oh,
mean,
and
which
just
is which
so
is a very like individual D&D model range, not this here's an army of whatever versus, so they're a different type of company, but they're the only ones I can think of that have the sheer volume that Games Workshop does.
and you have to understand they have to limit their range because there's only so much retailers are willing to carry. There's so much space allocated in stores for each thing that they carry, and there's a
and the
lot of
warehouse
competition now. So
and
I
the
mean,
warehouse itself.
well, this is not even beyond the warehouse. I'm talking about a regular, mom and pop retail store.
Oh, I
They
know
have
that.
so much space
Yeah,
on their rack to dedicate to Games Workshop. So
yeah.
what you do is you give them like a planogram as a trade salesperson, and then you basically say, hey, you should have some of these, you should have some of those. These are core troops. You need more of these than you do this guy, the single figure, and then you set them up for that to order on a regular basis when they're getting low on core troops and all that. But nowadays, I mean, when we worked there, there used to be a lot of metal, still a lot of metal figures and a lot of blisters. And again, you needed a rack and you needed to hang these figures.
Yeah, with the
Now it's
hooks and
all plastic. It's all for the
Mhm.
most part all plastic. So they don't have that problem, but you still do have a spacing issue, and they have to retire certain figures. And I mean, sometimes they'll retire them because they have plans in the future to redesign them. And then other times they just limit the run if it's not selling as well as they want. I mean, I think that's a perfectly natural thing, and you can't get upset about that because there's still a mail order store and there's still things available to you that you can find these figures. As far as pricing goes, everybody and his brother is raising their prices right now. I mean, every hobbyist out there better suck it up because comic books have already done it. Not all of them yet. Not all the issues are the same yet, but they're getting there. Um, Toys, Hasbro has raised all their prices. I mean, it's a big time hit to buy an action figure, that are, a couple dollars more. And the thing, the people I actually feel sorry for are the people in Australia because, it's
Mhm.
like twice the amount for those
Yeah,
guys.
it's
And
always
then
been much more.
and they have to wait longer. It just is a total suck for those guys, which is so weird because they're so close to China, which
I
is where
know.
all the stuff
Yeah,
is coming from. It's
yeah.
kind of sad, but anyhow, the pricing is not a big surprise. And sometimes the pricing is warranted. We just are getting over a major pandemic and still dealing with things and issues and less people in the stores. They're trying to push these figures. It might be okay for older guys like us who can go online and buy stuff and all that. But if you're dealing with kids, I mean, kids probably get a lot of their purchases in store. And if they're not allowed to go in store, the sales are down. They've got, Games Workshop has people, investors to make happy. They've got to hit their margins. I'm
And
not
they have to
saying
pay.
it's
And
right.
With
Right.
the stock that they have in one of the other things people don't think about, stock being around doesn't mean that you hold on to it and it just stays there. You also have to pay for the stock
You
that
mean
you have
stock
in
as
there.
in product, stock on a
Correct.
shelf, not stock
Correct.
in the company
Yeah,
Games Workshop.
correct.
Correct. Yeah.
So they can't hold on to that stuff forever, and they don't want it to be around forever. The idea is to rotate it, get it out, pretty much on an as needed basis. So those older models, as you mentioned, that aren't selling very well, they want to rotate those out, get something new or something that's retro that hasn't been out there for a while, and cycle that back in because that's the norm. You take a lot of the "Oi, that's my leg," and crap like that, and bring that back out again as a "Hey, that's cool. I remember that when I was knee
Mhm.
high to a grasshopper" crap, and then sell it for a little bit till they can cycle it back out again, and trying to keep things fresh and the stock continuing to
Yeah.
rotate so that they
Yeah.
don't have
So
those overheads there as well.
right. So looking at it so when I was working at Games Workshop, one of the jobs I had there was trade sales, which was my job was to sell Games Workshop product to the retail stores that carried it. So I know a little bit about how kind of all that works, and I always refer to that as churn, right? So you're a store owner, comic book store owner, game store owner, whatever, and you put 15, 20 feet of wall space dedicated to Games Workshop. And if you put stuff there and it doesn't sell, you've just taken up 15 or 20 feet of anything. It doesn't have to be Games Workshop product, but per square foot, you got to sell stuff. How many times is it going to turn over or churn in a given year? You know what I mean? So if you just put old stuff there, and we've all been to the game parlor, which is this local store that used to be, in my area that we'd go to. And one thing I loved about his store is he carried all this ridiculously old stuff. Like you could find it, but it didn't churn. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the reasons he's no longer in business. He retired. He didn't like go out of business. He's like, oh, I'm retired. But I mean, it was kind of cool as a customer to go in and you could look through all these really old things. But from a business standpoint, he didn't have any churn. So going back to why Games Workshop refreshes models, they're I've always considered that they've done an amazing job. Like they'll have a model. What's the Goblin Doom Diver is a great example of that one. Used to come in a blister, and it was like a catapult dude with wings that you'd shoot him at the enemy and he would go smashing into him for Warhammer Fantasy. And then they redid the model, and then came in a box and it was more of a kit. So they redid the model, but the model got bigger, the model got better. It just it got more awesome. You could still play with the old one, so they weren't upsetting the older people that had the old models, but the new iterations, 99 times out of 100, they're just better models. Games Workshop's always done a good job of not just refreshing for the sake of refreshing. So when I worked there, the Stegadon model came out when it was made of metal. If you guys remember that one, and
I
you see the
remember.
the new plastic Stegadon model is amazing, right? Or that Lord Croak, he was metal also, and it was the dude that was like this kind of undead slan, and these new models are just amazing. So on the one hand, like if you look at it from the Games Workshop line item, okay, if I have a Lizardman army, I need a Stegadon entry and I need a Lord Croak entry, right? What's the price point on the old ones? It's lower, right? Now that they've raised the quality and they've raised the price, you want to hit eBay and get the old ones, knock yourself out. It's tournament legal. You can go play all day long. But the new ones are amazing. So they're refreshing that line because that model came out 20 years ago or whatever it is.
Also the fact that everything's plastic now, and actually plastic tooling is more expensive than
Yeah,
actually making metal molds.
yeah, a
Right.
lot
So
more.
the good thing is
Yeah.
that Games Workshop, I know they invested money in machines that they could make their own molds and their own
Yeah,
tooling.
Yeah.
Like when they started out, someone else was doing it for them.
yeah,
But I mean, then they bought their own machines and they were able to do it themselves, and that actually saved money for them. But and also I'm sure why they were making everything out of plastic, just because it's just easier and cheaper, and you know. But the tooling initially is expensive.
Yeah. It can be hundreds of thousands of
Yeah,
dollars for
I
a
mean it's
complex
it's
mold.
very
Well,
expensive to get it made.
I
But
remember back when we were there, just so anybody who's watching this knows, we all used to work at Games Workshop. And I remember when we were there, getting a mold made for the plastics was about 10 grand. And if you made it for the rubber out of, for the metal ones, you'd make it out of rubber. That was $50. So it was a huge difference. But as you were saying, Drew, over the long term, it really does make a difference because the metal became really expensive, especially once they couldn't use lead anymore.
Right.
Remember when they switched over to pewter?
Tin,
And
pewter tin mix. Yeah.
yeah, and then the shipping in that metal,
It's heavy. Yeah.
yeah. So just the costs that go along with it were it really did save them a lot of money if you were able to invest in that plastic side first. So that was a very smart thing to do for them to
And
get
the
Yeah, and the
rubber
metal
doesn't
injection molds will basically never wear out.
yeah,
Like you can get
right.
hundreds of thousands of cycles through the mold, whereas the rubber ones,
Rubber
depending
ones.
on the model and the
Yep.
undercuts and things like that. Although I was at I forget which show it was. I think it was Origins this year, and there was a company there that was doing this weird mix of they used the same rubber as like injection as the spin cast molds, but they injected it, so it was like injection molding resin into a kind of a hard, almost tire rubber type mold. So it was this weird mix of the spin casting technology that they had this little machine where it would melt resin and inject it into it. And who's the guys that make Infinity, the war game? Like they bought that for molding, and they had a comparison thing of because they were one of the last ones that were using metal because a lot of people have moved away from that, and now they're moving to resin using this new technology. But again, all of that was like orders of magnitude less expensive than injection molding. You know what I'm saying? So for these smaller companies, they can go in and maybe buy that to bring their molding in house. So there's some interesting things going on in the tabletop gaming industry. And I've said this for years. There's never been a better time to be a miniature wargamer. Like Games Workshop's always been great and they've been at the forefront, but man, there are so many cool figures out there now.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's face it, that's one of the reasons we're all into it is the figures are so
the
neat and
advent
cool.
of the ability to do most of the designing with computer rather
Yeah.
than actually having to sculpt it, it
Mhm.
really expanded that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And
And
3D printing. I mean, look at some of the companies that you can design your D&D figure, and they're
yeah,
fantastic looking.
Yeah, I've ordered a
They,
couple of those. Hero
they,
Forge was the one.
yeah, yeah. You're talking Hero Forge. You're talking like $30 some for your own guy, but they look great. And I mean, the 3D printing on that thing. I mean, they're fantastic.
yeah,
You paint them up. They're your own figure. They keep adding onto their catalog of the different things that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as like D&D, I highly recommend those guys. I mean, they just make it really fun, and you can spend hours making your guy and
Yeah,
making your
you can go
friends'
in and
guys.
make your guy, and then you can do a screen capture of it. Because I
Right.
play on Roll20, and I've got my guy, and then captured a digital image of it to use as my token on Roll20.
And they're wisely allow that to happen. I mean,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
know what
But
you're
I mean,
doing.
if you own a 3D printer, you can order
Oh yeah,
the digital file for much less than having them print
yeah,
it and ship it to you. And those printers are not that expensive anymore. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you can
yeah.
get a printer for $300, $400, $500 on the low end. Then these are the resin printers that essentially shine a laser at the resin and cure it, which is different than the ones that lay down the little strings of plastic.
yeah,
Because those don't really have the quality for a figure. Those would
yeah.
be good
Those
for
are more
terrain
like
and things
glue
like that.
guns.
And you can save
Yeah,
your guys. I love in your account, you can save your
right.
figures, your character's name. And as time goes on in your campaign, if your character gets a different weapon, gets a different look, loses an arm, does something
It's a
weird or
mount.
whatever,
Yeah.
you can adjust them and make and save a new model. And you can see your character's progression and order it as you go along. I think it's really a lot of fun, and it really has made um, I mean, it's something that as a kid when I was playing D&D when it first came out, and uh, that was always a dream. Like you always were looking. I remember looking through Ral Partha figures, trying to
Right.
find the
Yeah.
exact figure of my guy. Like which one best represents my guy? This guy or
Uh-huh.
this guy? You
Well,
know,
that's why I started sculpting. Was because of that. I couldn't find stuff that represented what I was trying to find. And for the longest time, I thought, well, I can't do that because you'd see the figures when they're sculpting, you're like, oh my God, I can't do that. But that's how I started in that was because you look for something that represents that image that you have in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't get it. And so in order to make it that a little bit more immersive, you try to, make something that way. And so
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
great.
I actually went into that that on oh god, what was the name of the 3D printing place? They'll make it for you. I just drew a blank. Hero Forge. I went in
Right.
there and I basically created digital versions of all my role playing characters I've had over the years.
Yeah,
So I was
which
doing
is
all the different ones. So they're all up there in my library, and I printed off a couple of them, but the rest of them are up there. And one of these days, I'll get around to like having them print and ship, and I'll actually have all of my role playing characters that I played over the years uh, represented in character form,
and they're
which is
also
really
awesome
cool.
gifts too. I mean, as far as on the nerdy end of things, like if you have a buddy who has a character or whatever, you get a hold of the description, you try to make them, and you could totally surprise them. And now they come in color, which
Right.
is mind-boggling. You don't have to paint them, and they look good. Let me tell
Do they
you,
look good? Because I haven't really. I know that they do. I
I
haven't looked
got
at
one.
what the quality
do they
is.
look
So
good as in good enough to play with, or do they look good like,
They look really good, and I mean, they look so good that I think you could go back and if you really wanted to like oomph them up a little bit, you could add some paint to that and
okay.
really some highlights and things and really push them
See,
up.
that's what I mean. It's not quite to the point like the
They're
stuff
a
I made
beautiful
for you for that
base. It's
40K
a
game.
beautiful base painting,
Okay.
clean,
Okay, I get it. I
beautiful
got it.
base painting,
I got
and
it.
but I mean very detailed, like base
okay,
painting. I mean, we're not talking broad strokes. We're talking
Yeah.
teeny tiny details. So I
okay.
applaud them. They've really taken
Yeah,
the nerd
I
level
hadn't
up.
even thought about that as a gift. So last night I had the chance to sit down. So I've since been married, and my new wife has a 10-year-old son, and he wants to play D&D. And so he's roped us all into playing D&D. So I'm running this game with him and his sister and his mom and a family friend and his sister-in-law who lives over in Maryland. So she jumped in on Roll20, and so we did a hybrid game last night. He played his first D&D game, and he's all excited about it and whatnot. And I didn't even think like, oh, maybe I could just order everybody characters and then have their own little their own
Yeah.
figure. So
Yeah, what's really funny is my buddy that I play, my childhood buddy I play D&D with. I got him as a gift his figure in my game, and he actually he made his figure, and then I'm like, hey, could you send it to me? I want to check it out. So he sent it to me, and then I bought it, and I had it shipped to him, and he was like, well, it looks really cool. Thanks for doing that, blah blah, and then he's like, hey, I'm shipping it back to you because I want to see it on the table with everybody else's characters.
uh,
So he like shipped it back so he could see his guy and know where he is with things. Because we just use, like I said, he's on a computer screen, and I just use a dry erase board and
mhm.
figures and move them around and draw the stuff and everything. And so now he gets to see his guy.
Okay.
He
Yeah,
can
no, we hooked
identify his
we,
guy
we hooked a
clearly.
second laptop up to Roll20 so we could display it on the living room TV.
Yeah, that's
That
cool.
that way because I didn't have like all the maps and whatnot and so I was like, oh, I'm going to do it that way. So we're doing this kind of hybrid approach, but I had everybody roll physical dice and they have their character sheets, and so the only one using Roll20 is the remote person
Right.
who's played before. Yeah,
That's
like
how we are.
she knows what she's doing, and so
Yeah, my buddy's like he's using the remote dice and all that, and we're just we're using physical dice because it's my daughter, my wife, and myself, and small group, but it's great. It's totally
Do
a
you
lot of
do the
fun.
death blow game?
No, we don't
uh,
do Death Club.
I do. I've instituted that in all of my sessions.
Say, yeah. That's one of the coolest things, man. It
That's
is. I
right.
don't
So
know.
for those
I
of
don't
you
know
who
why,
don't
but it's
know
fun.
what Deathblow, I call it a mini game, and so I begin and end all of my sessions with what we call Deathblow, and that is every player takes a d20 and it's a roll off, and so everybody rolls, and the first person to get a 20 gets to knock somebody else out of the game, and then the last man standing gets a free reroll that they can use in the session. And so if you do it at the beginning and the end, it gives you a chance to roll some dice and talk a little smack and kind of, oh, I knocked Drew out, oh, I knocked Sean out or whatever. And then the
But
smart
yeah, you
players
get to pick who you
will
want.
quickly figure out that the DM gets knocked out first because they don't want him to have a reroll.
No, it
So
always ends up
I'm the
being Mark.
DM, so they
It
all
always
keep
ends up
knocking me
being
out.
Mark
They
because
knock me
everybody,
out hard.
because Mark's
Mark was
always
always
talking
first,
smack.
and as soon as like 20,
Well, I'm the
Mark.
DM, so it's either way, it's going to be me.
And
I've
Robbie
been
would always
getting
be
out
next.
forever.
I just like how Mark tried to rationalize it. It's because he's the DM, not because he's giving everybody a rash of nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah. So many rerolls.
Oh man. I also like, speaking of Games Workshop, I have to say, it is nice. You were saying, Mark, it's nice to be alive at this time for tabletop gaming and stuff like that. You were saying, Mark, how nice it is to be alive at this time for tabletop games and stuff. How long have we been saying they should be advancing the story? Because as long as we've been doing 40K and all that, is a really cool setting and all of
Yeah,
that.
Rogue Trader is the answer to that.
What do you
Rogue
mean?
Trader. I've been in 40K since it came out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
said,
yeah.
Rogue
Yes.
Trader. So I didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't jump in like second edition or something. Literally first, Rogue Trader. So
Yeah, yeah. The commander sitting there on the cover beating somebody to death with the orc's head. And the story, we've seen the Horse Heresy born, when it was, hey, we need something so people can fight each other with the same army. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Well, how about if they had a war, right?
Yeah.
The birth of that, the whole thing, we saw the stuff beforehand, before they retconned all that and everything, and then all the stuff in between. But how long have we been saying, but it's static. You're staying in the same age. Nothing's moving, nothing's changing, nothing's happening. And I will say it is nice under the new leadership that they have over there that they are actually doing that. I remember having an argument with a guy at one of their stores down in Fair Oaks, down in Fair Oaks Mall, and telling him they need to take a lesson from Star Wars. Star Wars has the prequel era, but they also have the Old Republic. Then they have the sequel era, and then they have the new Jedi Order or the New Republic, and all of that after, and all the retcons with that. But they have all these different settings, and if you want to tell the story in one of the settings or another one, you can do that. Why wouldn't 40K do that? And they were saying, well, no, you can't. Dude, you got 10,000 years, right, that you can mess with, where you had, before you even had any of the stuff that happened with 30K. And then you got the Horus Heresy era, and then however many thousands of years you want to have it until there's this big apocalypse thing with the Emperor and all that.
Mm-hmm.
You got plenty you can explore. It's just nice to finally see them doing that with the Primarch coming back.
I
and
agree.
all that.
I agree. Yeah, well, I had this almost the same conversation with a Games Workshop employee. We were talking about the models, and I was like, I love Space Marines. That's what brought me into the hobby, was how cool Space Marines are. But when you look at the old ones, you're like, yep, those were hot back in 1987, right? But they hadn't updated them, and then along comes the Primaris Marines, and you're like, there you go. You know what I mean? Like, Primaris Marines look like what Space Marines should look like with today's technology. It's not somebody with some green stuff sculpting it, and like I say, you can look back at the stuff that came out during Rogue Trader, and you're like, ooh, maybe that's not so awesome. But what it was then? There was nothing better than that then. Like, it's matured over the decades.
Well, I think, but see, I'll tell you, this is my issue with it. I honestly think you would have had stuff like that back then. But as I remember with, like, when I was doing that crap for Jervis Johnson and all that, the thing and not just him, but other companies as well, they had a time frame. They wanted it done in this amount of time, and that's it. And they wanted it to look, they wanted the way they wanted it to look, and all that. So you didn't have the opportunity to actually do a piece of art. You had to do a piece of property for their business. And so just churn it out. And I had them tell me that numerous times. Don't care so much about how it looks. We just want it done, And so that doesn't allow for creativity. That just stifles it. And you just end up with what you had, which was as quick as guys could actually throw that green putty together to look something like the Marine they wanted. And then every now and again, they'd let them take a little more time to do like a, Santa Marine or something stupid like that, and bring that out. Not that that was stupid. I mean, I always thought that was kind of cool, but those special, the special ones. That's why I think you see the big jump in how they look now, is that they didn't have to do any of that before, because there was nobody else who was going to be able to do it. No one else was going to be able to do that same kind of thing. They owned a cool IP. They could get a cool enough looking figure for what they needed to get done. But until somebody else raised the game, They weren't going to do that. The
Yeah.
Primaris Marines came out because you had like Skybore and all these other ones doing these aftermarket Marines and calling them Roman sci-fi figures and crap like that. Everybody knew what it was, but you buy them because they looked cooler than the
Yeah.
ones that Games Workshop was putting out. You'd look at a Imperial Guardsman and a Space Marine and be like, they look the same size. What the hell is this? Well, they represent, No, it kind of takes you out of the moment
Yeah.
when you look at this
Well,
other.
I think that's the reason they kind of went with Primaris is everybody wanted true scale Marines.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
But how many players would you really upset if you're like, you know what? We're going to re-release Marines, and now they're all bigger and better, and everyone that had built armies over the last 30 or 40 years would be like, well, I don't want to use these guys anymore, and so they kind of like, oh, we'll make them Primaris Marines, but you can still use your regular Marines.
Yeah.
So it was a way to give players new Marines in true scale without invalidating any of the old figures,
Yeah.
which I liked. I kind of liked
I
it.
didn't mind it. I thought actually the story that they had go with it and all that, they did
Mhm.
put some effort into it. And thank goodness
Yeah.
they got some creative people who were able to do
They
that.
do. And I also think
That was
going
all
back to
right.
the older figures, some of it was because they were making them out of metal
Yeah.
and spin casting them, that you could only make them so big. You could only
Yeah.
make them so complicated because if they're ridiculously complicated with a lot of undercuts, the mold's going to wear out quicker, right? So
Yeah.
there's things you couldn't do. Like you remember the old land speeder?
Yeah.
That was metal, it was a big hunk of metal, but it was so tiny
The one
compared to
before, the
compared to
one
the new
after
ones.
the one after the old right guard can, right? Or the right guard speed stick thing.
Oh yeah,
Remember?
yeah. That was
Yeah.
in the book, and
Yeah.
making yeah,
But I'm glad
yeah.
they've moved the story along. That
Me too.
I think that's
Now,
pretty
now
cool.
here's the thing I've always wanted. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you guys before. Is in 40K we've seen the tabletop version, right? We've seen the Battlefleet Gothic, the spaceships and whatnot. We've seen Epic Scale, right, which was like the 15 or even 10 millimeter dudes. So we
Yeah.
have 3 different scales, and I wonder why nobody's ever connected them for a campaign. Wouldn't it be cool to be like, oh, here's my flotilla of ships, and we're going to fly in and do this, and then we're going to land on this planet, and why couldn't you, zoom in and zoom out of the battlefield, right? Because it's always like, oh, your 2,000 points is against my 2,000 points, and then we're going to fight a perfectly matched battle across 4 feet of tabletop.
I think people have
When
messed
you
with stuff like that.
well, messed with it is not the same thing as supported from the company
Yeah.
level where they're like, here's
Yeah.
how you connect these 3 games. Right now, they're 3 separate games,
Yeah.
and they're not even doing 2 of them anymore. I think they're
Yeah.
going to bring
No,
Battlefleet Gothic back. That's what I hear.
there's
Um,
no. I know what you mean. There's no contiguous story that you can do for a campaign to actually, if you have all these armies and you want to do it this way, here's how you do it. And if you have an outcome over here like this is how it affects this part here. And, something that can be an overall story as opposed to just let's get together and do a one-off kind of
yeah.
thing is pretty
Yeah.
much what it
And I
usually
do like
is.
the way they've added match play and narrative play and kind of specifically said, if you're trying to do like a tournament and you want match play, here's the points values and away you go. If you just want to tell a big story, like I always loved the cover of the original Rogue Trader book where those Crimson Fists were about to get wiped out by these orcs, but they were going to make them pay for it.
Yeah.
Like that was just very evocative. And 2,000 point army against my 2,000 point army doesn't really represent what I saw on that cover. You know what I mean? Sometimes battles aren't fair, and
Yeah, I
maybe they
always
shouldn't
hated.
be.
My opinion on that. I've always hated that. I think as soon as you go to, and I call it the flip a coin method, where essentially you're trying to make it as complicated as possible to flip a coin and see who wins. That's
Yeah.
really what it ends up being. And to me, that kills any storytelling, any ability to create something really unusual. To this day, we all know the name of Uno, the orc who, just would not die. And that kind of thing doesn't come about when you have such a tournament focus on everything being as equal as possible. And I get why it's there because everybody wants to go to a tournament and win and say, I won with my army and I did this and all that. But it doesn't make for a story, man. You just might as well flip a coin. So that, for me, it takes the joy out of it. I like something
Yeah.
where it's like you
Right.
said, you have the last stand thing, and you know you're getting wiped out. How long can you hang out till that happens?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah,
So,
and like I said, I've been to LVO a couple of times, and I remember walking by, um, and I was listening. It was like the Saturday morning, like, hey, everybody gather around, we're getting ready to start off this thing, and it was for the 40K narrative, and and just the kind of here's how we're gonna do things was very much that. It's like this isn't about who's gonna win. This isn't about like how many points you brought. We're gonna put you into the story and have a good time. And it almost made me wish I was playing in that. I wasn't at the time, but like I say, they definitely had the right attitude. And I've done both. I've played in a couple of the tournaments for Age of Sigmar or whatnot, and it was fun, but takes a certain mindset to be like tournament savvy, and I'm going to win, and here I'm going to tweak my army for the current meta versus the three of us getting together and rolling some dice and having some fun.
yeah. Yeah, I always like that stuff. What do you like storytelling better than just being even, right, Drew?
I mean, it all depends. I mean, I like the storytelling, obviously, but I think as far as tournaments, if you're doing tournaments with prizes and things like that, you kind of have to try to make it as equal as
Yeah,
possible.
but how
And
many
it's a
people are
tough
doing
job
those
to
though?
do. It's
No,
not
there's a pretty big tournament scene right now.
it's not an easy thing to do. But I think if you're having a tournament to have like bragging rights of I held out against double the points or things like that. I think that's great. I mean, um,
One of the funnest battles I had was when Mark and I went to Springfield Mall when GW used to have a store there, and I brought my Simpsons army, and which I still see pop up online every now and again. People
It
talking
does.
about,
It
which
does.
is
And let
cool.
me stop right there. So, for those of you that don't know, and maybe some of you saw this on the internet, Sean is an accomplished sculptor and painter, Golden Demon Award winner, and he got the idea to take some Space Marines, and he wanted to sculpt them with character heads from the popular cartoon The Simpsons, right? So he had Homer as Marnie as Calgar. Who were some of the other ones? You had like the bus driver guy.
Yeah,
What's his
did. Yeah,
name?
Otto was driving
Otto was driving a
Tankosaurus.
driving Tankosaurus,
Yeah,
and what is it? Dr.
Lenny
Hibbert
and
as a Space Marine medic.
yeah. Yeah, I had all of them, and Mr. Smithers as an assassin, and all of that stuff. And I took that army up. That Mark and I spent some time coming up with rules
Yeah, we came
for
with
them.
some funny rules.
Yeah, and so we went up to Games Workshop, and I always wanted to play a game with 40K versus Fantasy Battle. At the time, it was before all of the all the
Age of
Age
Sigmar.
of Sigmar stuff. And so I always wanted to do a battle between those two. You knew who was going to win, you knew, but just for the fun of it, to see what was going to happen. So the guy up there, who I forget his name, one of the employees at that particular GW, he was all about it and grabbed an army, went out there and did our thing. And oh man, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. That was one of the most fun games I've had. Was that one. And one of the worst ones was up at the Battle Bunker. I remember that was the last one I played. After that one at the Battle Bunker, it was just as dry and tournamenty as you can imagine, and it just took all the fun out of it. And after that, never played it again. What I did was I got into the fluff side of it. I'd paint things, I'd sculpt things, read things, stuff like that. But if it didn't have to do with the story or that part of it, it just didn't do it for me, man. And sadly, I know at that time anyway, most of the focus was on, like you said, Drew, the tournament side of it. If it didn't advance that, then they really
I've never been a
didn't do
tournament
much.
guy. I mean, I like, and the other thing is too, when I would attempt to paint an army, it would always just be what I wanted to paint. It wouldn't be um, the most strategic or
Yeah,
necessarily.
I need this troop choice because it's hot in the meta right now.
Yeah, and of course I was playing Imperial Guard, and I just wanted lots of toy soldiers to push
I
around and
remember. Yep, I
and
remember.
and try to convert them up and make them look different. And that's not the way to go if you want to try to be efficient and make an Imperial Guard army. You don't
Nope.
not converting them is not the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about it.
But I mean, I had fun. I think it comes down to whatever floats your boat. I enjoyed doing that, and I mean, there are some people that just like to hurry up and get a bunch of troops together and paint them up and put them on the table, and that's fine too. I mean, whatever makes you happy in the hobby is how you should pursue it, and no one else to say any criticism. Because everybody's got their own bag when it comes to that sort of thing.
You
Yeah.
would think, man, but you remember with that Star Wars thing, you remember how frustrated I was when I was DMing that game for you guys, and I was trying to get some help from Wizards of the Coast with some rules for specific characters and some outlandish powers and all that. And the pushback I got from everybody in the community on there was crazy. I mean, you'd have
Right.
thought I
Yeah,
slapped
it
their
wasn't
dog.
pushback from Wizards of the Coast. It was he went on some of the message boards and was like, "Hey, we're playing this game, and I have some questions about X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
And but I was gonna say, kind of dovetailing all of this together, I think that's one of the reasons I love role playing games. Probably now, I love Warhammer. I've a my right to my right is my whole airbrush painting station, so I still love Warhammer and wargaming and painting figures and whatnot. Like that's a hobby that don't ever intend to give up. But I've been playing role playing games even longer, and it's collaborative. It's not the DM against the players. It can be if you're doing it wrong.
Right.
But I mean,
It can
it's
be.
this
You're
collaborative
doing it wrong.
storytelling where everyone can have a good time playing this game, even if your character is getting munched on and beat up by a monster. Everybody can still have a really good time. Whereas if we're playing Warhammer, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. You know what I mean? And
Right.
if you're playing against somebody like in a tournament level, I've done things where it's like, hey, I'm here to do the thing, and this guy's so dialed in that it's like dead, 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 dead. And he's tabling you on like turn 1.5, and you're like, well, that was fun. I'm glad I
Right.
glad I flew all the way to Las Vegas for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember the look on that guy's face when we were in that tournament up in Laurel, and this was a long time ago when
Oh
GW
yes,
had a store in the
this was
Laurel.
Rogue Trader. Yeah,
Yeah, and they had a
they were
tournament, and I remember Mark and his brother Mike. Mark, they hated him.
Yeah.
Mark was the reason that they changed the rules of the tournament because they had it in there that if you beat the other guy, you could actually take one of their pieces of equipment. And so Mark we were both rules lawyers. We knew exactly where everything was in the book and could quote it and all that. And so Mark, immediately after he beat somebody, would pop out their bionic eye. And then in the next one, he'd start just blasting smoke.
That's right. I'd give it to
field.
my rocket launcher guy or my laser cannon guy.
Yeah. And so the other guy was screwed. And so all through the season, Mark was just accumulating eyes. And so that I remember by the end of it, the guy he was playing, as soon as Mark beat him, Mark said, okay, and he said, I know, here, you're taking the eye. I know. It was known. And so the next season, they actually wrote in there, you can't take the bionic eye. You can,
That's right.
or whatever they put in there for that.
And then we used
But yeah,
stasis
that
grenades
was-
for cover because nothing could pass through them. And so you could toss
Yeah.
a stasis grenade and immediately create some hard cover.
Or Mark's thing with throwing the vortex grenade in the middle of the water feature. And well, why isn't everybody it's a black hole. They should all be swept in by the water.
Well, the
You
rules
know,
couldn't
that's
cover
it.
something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, but I
if
remember
you
you
throw a
arguing
vortex.
about
I was like, wait a second. These guys are
Yeah.
like hiding behind this house in a lake, right? And I was like, oh, I throw a vortex grenade in the middle of the lake. Now the water all has a place to go. It's a big drain. Would it drag the people in the lake with them? And I was like, it seems reasonable, but
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
Yeah.
oh, that would have been great.
Yeah. So, that was, but it wasn't, you knew it wasn't, looking back on it now, you knew it
Yeah.
wasn't fun for other people
Yeah.
who were there. It wasn't fun at all. Because we didn't know. We'd go and leave there laughing all the way to the Subway where we got our meatball subs and ate and all that crap. But the other person had a horrible time. But you're right about you were mentioning about the DMing thing, and I remember I was one of the worst people for that. And Mark will tell you, I was one of the worst DMs for that. If I was DMing something, you knew you were getting betrayed like 4 or 5, 8 times a game because it was all a game about I'm gonna, put you in this situation and screw you over, and because I thought that was, for some reason, I thought that was fun, and I don't know why. But I remember where that changed. No, I remember where that changed, and it was over at Robbie's house when we were doing that game with the Jedi, and you guys were getting your lightsabers. I don't know if you remember that, Mark, but you guys landed on um, on Ilum to get your lightsaber crystals. And I remember I had your master die in the crash, and Robbie even felt so bad for me because it was my in-game character. He's like, well, but you got to roll again. He may not have died and all that and everything, because I was trying to fluff how much the numbers were. I don't remember what it was. He's dead, and Robbie was like, well, roll again. You might be wrong. And thankfully, I rolled worse, so he was like done. But I remember at the end of it, you guys went through this whole thing, got chased by Darksiders and all that, and ended up having to go to that dark side source. Remember that? And the choice was, are you going to touch it or are you not? Are you going to try to use the dark side energy to save yourselves, or, all that? And afterwards, you wake up in the cave, and those who didn't touch it had their crystal, and those who did touch it didn't. And Mark was the only one who did touch it, so he didn't have his crystal. And I thought Mark was going to, but this was the thing. I thought Mark was going to be pissed off about it. Right. But I remember Mark afterwards told me, you said that was one of the best games you'd played. And I remember that was an eye-opening moment for me, where I realized that it wasn't about outsmarting you. It wasn't about that. And it wasn't about creating this, convoluted, storyline with all these betrayals and such. But it was about making a story that was trying to make one that was compelling for you.
Yeah,
And
to be fair, I was angry, not mad, whatever. Like it was like, oh
yeah,
man, but that was because we've known each other forever, and he knew what my character would do because I was the one playing it. You know what I mean? So I was a little bit, I don't know if it's emotional manipulation or whatever, but like he knew kind of, oh, Mark would definitely make this choice. And he used that in the game, and I was not terribly happy about that. But like I say, in retrospect, I was like, that was one of the coolest things ever, because it ended up being like one of those Luke goes into the cave and he ends up fighting Darth Vader, and his face is really in it, kind of flashback scenes in our role playing game. So, and he set it up really, really well, and like it just worked. And no, I might not have been like really happy in that moment, but it didn't take me very long to go, oh man, that was really cool. That was the kind of thing that
and
that you remember.
That's one of the compliments that I actually carried with me after that for the rest of my life, because that meant so much to me. It meant a lot, and it actually changed how I thought about doing all that stuff. And so all the stuff that I DM'd after that, I don't know if you noticed a difference
Oh
in the
yeah.
themes before or after, but it changed how I did that because of that. I realized, oh, wait, it's not about that. It's about this. And I actually started taking a lot more joy in doing that after that. So we
I've
should
always
do
felt rooting for the players was. I've always felt rooting for the players. I don't know. I want them. I just want to challenge them and make it feel like everything they've gotten, they've earned,
Right.
and not make them, feel bad for their decisions, and just enjoy challenging them. And when they succeed, especially when it was a struggle, when they succeed, it really is the world. That's what you do it for. To see them like so happy, like, oh, and we did this,
did
and
a
we did that.
thing. Yeah. Well, like
Yeah.
the game last night, literally it was all new players except for the one remote, and she'd played before. So I got a year-old, and I got like a 17-year-old, and I got like my wife and like a 19-year-old who were playing, never played D&D before. I gave them the pre-made character sheets from Lost Mine of Fendelver or whatever, and that's what we're playing.
It's great.
And
It's a great
we're doing, I know, it was great. It was a good introduction. But we started out, I'm like, oh, tell us about your character. And they're all like looking at their sheet. Where do I find this? And we get around, and then it's like my turn, and they're like, what's your character? And I'm like, oh, I'm all the other characters. And so I kind of had to explain it to them that, I'm the dungeon master, and like, if I just wanted, and after the game, like one of the characters had gotten stabbed by one of the goblins in the little ambush, twice, and she would be dead because I rolled a 6 for damage on that second attack. But I fudged it, and I was like, "Oh, you took 2 points of damage," so she had like 1 or 2 points left, and they ran up and saved her, and we're really happy about all that. And so after the game, I was like explaining that I fudged the damage roll so that the experienced player didn't die. But imagine if that was the 10-year-old in his first D&D session,
Right.
and his character died. I was like, I'm not gonna let that happen. You know what I mean? Because if I wanted to, I could have put 50 goblins there, and you'd all be dead.
Right.
So it's not about me against you, but it's my job to make it tough. And if you do something stupid, you're going to pay for it. And so I had to actually explain this to brand new players, and it was, kind of cool and refreshing. I love seeing new people kind of get it, because they don't, like, my wife was very nervous about role playing, so that she thought it was going to be like difficult or hard, or oh my gosh, what do I have to do? What if I'm not creative enough? And these kind of thoughts. And it was a fun session, and all they did was get ambushed by a couple of goblins and fight them off. That's
big
as
deal
far
for
as we
them,
got,
though.
but they had a great time.
That's
Do
cool.
you like, and this may not be a fair question, maybe you like both, but do you like doing that for them as a new player, or do you like playing with like our group, when
Experienced players,
not just experienced, because
experienced
experienced
players
could
that
be
I know
someone,
well.
well, experienced players like us, and with our, and not meaning that we're, better than, or that's not what I mean, but with the tempo that we have when we
Right.
play.
See, I like both. It's very refreshing to play D&D, or any role playing. It doesn't have to be D&D, but D&D is what most people play. So I'm playing D&D with people who've never played before. They're never picked up a character sheet or rolled a dice. That's fun, because when I was 10 or 11 or 12, or whenever I first started playing D&D, I would have loved it if my dad sat down and taught me how to play. My dad didn't play D&D, or but I knew this other guy. I played with him once, and his dad played, and I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. And so I'm kind of putting myself in these shoes of, new stepdad comes in, and he does fun things like, I play Magic, and we play video games and things like that, and he wants to play D&D, and his older sister's in because the 10-year-old wants to play. Mom's in because the 10-year-old wants to play. Family friend wants to play D&D. She's in high school, but she came over. She's friends with one of the other daughters. So the other daughter's not playing, but her friend is, right? And so clearly she wants to play D&D, but has never played before. And so getting to introduce some couple of them, I would call them, reluctant. They're there for the other one, but all of them were like, that was funner than I thought it was going to be. That's fun to introduce people and to kind of get them going. But you can do a lot more sophisticated, complicated stories, epic, quests and battles and whatnot, that you can do with experienced players who you don't have to get them over the hump of learning how to play or knowing what
See,
spells
I've just
do what.
had some of the stuff like Drew's interaction with you when you two were playing, when Drew was your master and you were
That
the
was fun.
Padawan.
Yeah.
I loved the interaction between you two. And I knew I would. I knew it was going to be great. I knew Mark was going to drive Drew nuts, and
Drew and I have a
was gonna-
love-hate relationship where
Yeah.
I know just how to jump up and down on Drew's last nerve. And to be fair, not just Drew's last nerve, pretty much anyone I meet.
But it was a lot of
It
fun,
was a
and
fun
having
little
that
battle.
interaction was great.
He murdered thousands, and
They
then
had
tried
it
to make
coming.
it sound like it was an accident, like he didn't know what he was doing. And I was like, don't even try.
Oh, that's
Don't even try.
right. I forgot about that.
Murdered
That's
a
Yeah,
whole
there was
entire
there was a
Sky
lot of
City.
people that got killed.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
But that
Right,
was,
but,
yeah, that
but
was
one of the things I liked
that
about
was
that
fun.
is because I was a Padawan and Drew was my master. Drew was 3, 4, 5 levels higher than me, right? Because most campaigns, everyone's the same level or whatever, and we did that one different, where we had a couple of Jedi Masters and a couple of Padawans in the party, and it was fun. I enjoyed that. Again, because it's one of the things I like less about tabletop gaming is that there's this balance. Oh, I've got 2,000 points on one side, 2,000 points on the other. Go. It's like you said, it's a very complicated way to flip a coin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Did I deploy right, or did I pick my troops right? There's some variables, but you're like, let's play and roll some dice, and it's cool. But it's about balance in a lot of the ways. Role playing games aren't
Who
really
is-
like that.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Drew, what do you like better? What do you think? And then I had one other question I wanted to
Between
ask.
wargaming and role playing.
Well,
between
no. Between those two, between
between
someone new or
newer versus more experienced.
I
not just the
find
experience, but more like our
like
sense of humor, our
our group
sensibilities.
is our group, as in you guys and some of the other schmoes we know, um, can be entertaining, but it also can be frustrating as a game master because there are things you want to do, and the people involved are gonna try to undercut your story and make it hard for you. And so,
But
and I
what
mean,
about
they
as a
Right.
purposely, players purposely try to screw up your campaign
yeah,
Yeah.
just
yeah.
to get under your
For
skin
comedic effect or to
and
poke fun at
see
your
how it's going to go. And sometimes that's funny, but it also makes it then become less about the story and more about like, well, now I'm going to break this out on you. And you're like, oh crap.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And I
No,
mean,
there's a lot of that. Yeah, but
that's
like I
kind of
say, with a
annoying.
good role playing
I mean,
game group, when you get everybody on board, if everyone's
right.
like, "Hey guys, I want to tell this really cool story, this adventure, we're gonna do this," and everyone has buy-in, right? Because it's not just Mark wants to be the DM and you guys have to do the story I want you to do. It's collaborative storytelling, right? And so this type of gaming where it's the DM against the players, and it's very easy to fall into that, especially with more inexperienced players or we've all done it. Like we
Well,
remember
especially
when
when the
when Rich
players are
was like,
trying to
I'm a DM
sabotage.
anything you throw at me, and we derailed his campaign in like 15 minutes into one session because we were going to
Right.
go open cash for gold shops all up and down the
That was a
East
great
Coast.
plan, by the
That was a
way.
great
That
plan.
was a great
But that was
plan.
a perfect example of us just being jerks for the sake of it.
Well,
Drew or
but
Rich was
don't you
asking
think?
for it, but I wouldn't want to play in that kind of game right now. I'd want to be like, okay, there's a time to be like, hey, let's just cut up and have a bunch of fun. And as a DM, sometimes I will purposely play that role of, oh no, you guys did this and you foiled my plans because it makes my players feel better. Like I'll ham it up as a DM, like, oh no, you killed my main bad guy. I wasn't expecting that in one round of combat. Oh no. I don't care. I got
I
an
thought
unlimited number of bad guys I can throw at you. You know what I'm saying?
the
So
last one I played with you guys though, which was that Space Marine one. I didn't feel like you guys were trying to screw anything up for me or
that's because
anything
we
like
weren't.
that.
We were on
That
board. That's what I
felt
mean.
like
There's a difference
yeah,
if all the
that
players
felt
are on
like a
board, everybody's rowing in the
collaborative.
same direction. Right.
Except when Kelly left me alone completely on a ship, and he's supposed to be there to back me up, and the assassin decides to leave. Do you
Oh
remember?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
do.
like, what are you doing?
That and
I
the
just
grenade
gonna,
idea.
I
Yeah,
just
but
decided to leave. It's like,
it's.
what the hell?
Yeah.
But
Well,
And
that's
you're
the
I
thing.
supposed
That's
to get
the,
out of
enjoyed.
that's
there.
the thing I said to my group from last night. Because the what the 17-year-old daughter isn't playing, but her best friend is in the group, right? And so my wife this morning was like, "Oh, well, you want to invite her and see if she wants to come play too." I'm like, "I'm fine with it if she wants to come play. That'd be great." I was like, "But everybody had a good time, and if you bring someone in who's not on board, who is reluctantly playing, who is only there because of whatever, and they have the wrong attitude, it can sour the whole group." Yeah,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And I don't think she's going to do that, but I was like, listen, we had a great time last night, and if you're like, bring someone who's had a really bad day or just doesn't have that same attitude, man, that can derail the entire group, right?
right now I'm enjoying like the group that I have because I have, um, my childhood friend that I started playing D&D with, um, and a lot of times we lived in the middle of nowhere, and at first there were three of us, and we used to play D&D um, all the time, and I think my two buddies were into it more than I was at the time. And then I started getting more on board and started understanding it more, and like, oh wow, this is really a lot of fun. And um, then he kind of drifted off, and it just left this other guy and I that lived close to each other, and there was like no one around us. But for like a whole summer, like I'd go down to his house, and sometimes I'd DM him. His character, he would have a character or two, and then sometimes he'd DM me, and I would have a character or two, and it would be on and off, and it would be a lot of fun. And then as we got into college, before we transferred to different places and bigger colleges or whatever, I had him and my girlfriend and these two like young guys, like this one guy and his buddy, who were clearly like was very much like the Stranger Things, with Steve and the kids. I was kind of like the Steve with these kids that are in
Mm-hmm.
ninth graders, but they were awesome. I mean, they were just really, they did stupid ninth grader things, but they were
Mm-hmm.
still a lot of fun to be with. And so I kind of really enjoyed that. But this game, of course, now, has my daughter, who I told you, like, tormented me to play. Was like, oh, you're not old enough when she first came to me. And then when I told her, oh, when you get, 12, we'll start, or 13, we'll start playing. And then she brought me the book when she turned, I think, 13. Let's do this. And she's ready to go. So I started just playing with her the Village of Hamlet, which was awesome. It's a great intro game. And then, she had one character and she was going to introduce a second one, and I had a non-player character with her. And then my wife had never played before, but, knew I really was into it. And I think she thought, I want to see what it's like, and I can spend time with you guys. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, you can play this non-player character for now. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And if you like it, you can roll up a character of your own. So it was so we had 3 characters. She had that, and then my daughter had 2. And then I talked to my buddy Pat, who hadn't played, my childhood friend, who hadn't played in quite some time. And I was telling him what we were doing. And, he was kind of having fun listening to the story. And at first I was doing a Frankenstein monster, a first edition, a couple of things from a second edition, and then stealing a couple of things here and there from like 5th. And then eventually I realized, as Lori and Sarah got into it, they were asking more questions that were not easily answered by the Frankenstein game. And I thought, well, this isn't really fair to them, because particularly Sarah, if she wants to play this with her own friends later on, she's not going to really understand the rules 100%. It's going to be different. So I already had the 5th edition stuff, and so I just switched us all over to, I don't know, around 4th level. I think I switched us all to 5th edition. And then my buddy Pat, joined us. And so everybody had essentially 2 characters. And it started out initially 2 characters in case somebody died. And it was a small group too. So, but now it's like, now I think the group's probably too big with 2 characters each.
So now you have to kill them.
Well, you're talking like, I think they're like, what, 8th or 9th level now. It's like when you're dealing with 8 player characters that are 9th level, I mean, and multiple wizards.
Yeah, everybody can do so many amazing
sorcerer,
things. And
cleric, paladin,
Yeah.
Fighter, thief. It's to the point where I'm like, okay, well, this is pretty tough. So I start really throwing some serious stuff at them. But it's been a lot of fun. I mean, we've been playing in the Forgotten Realms campaign, which I always liked Forgotten Realms. And it was easy enough to take Hamlet and put it in a spot like close to the Moon Sea and have them, put them on an overarching mission and have them travel across continent of Faerun and kind of explore to get to their final destination, which is Waterdeep. And it's been a lot of fun, as missions pop up and things like that. And it's really easy because my daughter like always wants to investigate things, so it's just perfect. I mean, she's not one to shy away from, oh, let's ignore that. Just like, oh yeah, I want to check that out. So I just like reel her into everything under the sun, which has been a lot of fun. And I think it would be fun to have another like experienced player. But I think having new players and experienced players is great as a DM, I think, because you're teaching, but they also have an example. As a DM, you can't always give them good examples of role playing or as a character, and it's good to have an experienced player like my buddy who can slip into the voice of another character, and we'll come up with a plan and make it interesting. And it's like there are a lot of bad players out there, guys that just want to like, oh, I'm going to make a campfire, I'm going to cook a meal, I'm going to play my lute,
Robbie.
and ignore like the noise in the woods. I never got those guys. I've
mean-
played with characters that did that in the same game. Matter of fact, that my childhood buddy, we were in the same game where there were these people
You
that
mean
just...
like Robbie?
Robbie at least does some stuff. Now, these guys were really bad. Like, they didn't do anything. Like, combat would start clearly that something's going to kill us, and they would be like not doing anything. I'm going to look at this and pull back and pull back. What? It's like, do something. It's just the worst kind of player. It's like, if you want to do like, they want to do more LARPing than they want to do like action oriented.
There are different types of role players, and as a DM, I think this is one of those things you have to look at your players and go, what are the different types, right? So there's the murder hobos who are like, oh, I want to go in here and just any chance I get to stick a sword in somebody or set something on fire, I'm going to do it. Right. And then you've got, like I say, the people that are they just want to assume the persona of a character and they're much more into the role playing or whatever. And then, there's some people who just love like planning or investigating. Right. The murder hobos don't like to investigate anything. They get bored and they go, oh my gosh, we got to go figure out this clue or find out.
It'll be 1,000 hours.
It's going to take 1,000 hours. You know what I mean? And
it's funny, It's funny, Mark's saying that.
Right.
Yeah.
Murder hobo.
The murder. And again, we've all, no one is just the one thing usually. You know what I'm saying? Like my brother Mike and
just
I,
the one thing.
We went to Gen Con and we played in one of the D&D, like quick come in, and you play like for an hour and a half or something. And they're running you through and they have like 3D terrain and the guy's got a pile of figures over there. And one of those figures was a dragon. And so me and brother Mike, and there's strangers here. It was me, my brother Mike, his wife, and like one or two other dudes. And like we go into the room and we run in and we're like killing stuff and we run to this next one and he's like, why are you going so fast? He goes, because we want to fight the dragon. We've only got an hour and a half. And the other guy's like, oh right, I run over there, and like he jumped right on board. We weren't being murder hobos. We were just trying to like get to the end of the dungeon because we wanted to be able to fight the dragon, which was different and fun. For this kind of, we're gonna play D&D for an hour, like quick little one shot. And then you get the people that just want to be, I'm going to call it the center of attention. It's what my character would do, which is, never, it's always at odds with what is maybe the smartest thing to do or what the rest of the party wants to do.
Yeah, I hate that.
You mean Russell?
Yeah. I mean, we've all been there and done that, and paladins are the worst, right? I can't let people do that. I'm
there are very
stupid.
few people that like, I don't just join any group to play D&D. I've never been that way. I don't, because I know I won't enjoy it. I like to find people that are, sort of rational and are adventurous and understand sort of the pulp sort of feel of Conan the Barbarian and Elric and Lord of the Rings, all kind of rolled into one. So you have someone that can interact normally in a time period that's different and weird, but yet at the same time you can go adventuring when you want to and know when you have to pull your sword to defend yourself and your friends. I do not like going with showboats. I do not like going with people that don't get the game. Like, they don't understand. They think that cooking and playing a normal life is the way for this game. And you're supposed to be the type of character that goes into adventure, that decides whether poverty or to save a friend, to help a friend, or something like that you're pulled into it. And maybe you don't start out at first level, you're not the bravest or you're not the best, that's okay. But as you get up in level and you've been doing things, I expect players to kind of carry their weight.
Yeah, you're the heroes of this realm, right?
It's even okay
See,
if they're
that's
a little
the thing.
cowardly, but
see, that's the thing for me, is that for me, it's always been like with the movies. This would be the best analogy I can think of. If you watch any of the kung fu flicks, right, like Drunken Master or something like that, right, or anything Jet Li, right, he's always going out to avenge his master because his master's died or whatever. I hate it in a movie where they have you follow the student. I don't care about the student. I want to see the one who's already there. I want to see the one who's already got the, the abilities and the experience and all of that stuff. I really didn't want to see Luke doing stuff. I wanted to see Yoda lifting more things up, that kind of thing. I wanted to see the one who's already there doing these magnificent things. I never, if I'm playing something like this, I don't want to be closer to my level. I want to be closer to this astronomical thing that I can, really take part in only in this era,
You're such a
or
power
only in this
gamer.
area. No, 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 no.
Yes,
Notice, I didn't
yes.
say no, no. How many times have you played with me? And how many times have I DM'd the game?
You definitely
Right?
look for the most powerful angle.
No, no, no. You're missing my point. You're missing my point. Mark, how many times do I DM versus play?
I think you DM more than you
More. You
play.
DM more.
More. And there's a reason for that, is because I don't like being the person in the game who's doing that. I don't like that. What I like is seeing my players being those people and doing that stuff in this universe. So I will facilitate this scenario in the universe where you decide just immense things. You are doing these galaxy changing, just amazing things, because I don't want I've never been entranced with like Boba Fett taking over Tatooine.
Yeah, you don't want
I
small
really don't
stakes.
care. Yeah, I want to see the story of the Emperor doing his thing, not the Death Trooper, trying to find some
Yeah, not
chick
that one
on.
Imperial Guardman who's trying to get back to his unit that he's
Right.
been cut off behind enemy lines. Like, that's
Yes.
cool, but that is not, Primarchs engaging
Yeah,
in one-on-one
exactly.
combat.
I
And
don't always like the big honking battle. I'm not definitely not like that. I'm more of the guy that goes from town to town and like the man with no name kind of thing.
Mark, who is the
Um,
guy who loves getting as many attacks as possible? That is Drew. I remember Drew with the old Star Wars game. The
that's
thing
not
he
every
loved about it
character.
was that he was able to throw a fist full of dice
yeah,
for his
yeah, yeah.
attacks. Yes,
It's
Yeah,
just
Drew.
how
but
how
Yeah,
it
but
goes
don't
to,
tell
down.
me.
but bringing this back,
Don't try to
we've all
sell
we've
me
all been
that
there, we've
crap.
all done. But bringing this back full circle, like this goes back to what you were talking about. Like we were playing this Jedi campaign, and Sean would go on to some of the message boards and be like, "Hey, my character's trying to do X, Y, and Z, and what do you guys think about this?" And he got all this pushback because everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, your characters are too powerful. That doesn't sound balanced." And we never really understood that. We're like, we're playing a role playing game. We're heroes. We're Jedi. We're like fighting Sith and doing all of these amazing things. Who's got time for balance? You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
don't play a role
Right.
playing game because I want to be, a middle aged guy that goes to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5,
right.
and has fun on the weekends. I want to be, a Jedi hero or a magic user or a barbarian wielding a big magic sword or these kind of, that's why we play role playing games, right? It's this escapism, the same reason you watch like
Yeah,
movies and play video games. It's all escapism where you get to be larger than life. And in role playing games, that's exactly why you're there. So why limit that? Why
yeah.
put the lid on what you can do? And now, yes,
See,
you
you
can be power
understand,
gamers where people are just, they go all munchkin on it and they just want to, get stupid. So there is some balance to how to pull that off.
but you
But I would
understand what
err on
I'm
the side of
saying.
letting my players be powerful and do cool things versus,
Yeah,
let's tone that down a little bit. Where's the fun in
Yeah, I
that?
just
I
don't
look
think
at
that's
it.
the end all be all to be the most powerful guy in the game. I think it's just fun
Right,
getting
but then you
there.
got to fight the most
I'm
powerful foes
saying
in the
I
game.
don't have anything against somebody who wants to play a stormtrooper on Tatooine. You want to do that, knock yourself out. I'm not going to sit there and say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's not fun." But
Yep.
for me, as the person who does want to be in charge of the story, where my players are the emperor and all that stuff, I don't want other people then turning around and saying, "Oh, that's too powerful. You need to be more like our characters."
Right.
If I only have a couple hours to play something like this, and this is something that I enjoy. I don't go to the movies to watch the regular guy go to go to work every day, 9 to 5, and, maybe get a raise and, that kind of, I don't need to go see that. I want to go see something amazing. I want to see the Avengers. You know, that
Yeah,
kind
or
of stuff.
Bruce Willis taking on a bunch of terrorists in Nakatomi Plaza.
There you go. And so for somebody to tell me you shouldn't be doing that because that's not fun. Well, how are you telling me what's fun for me or for my players? And
Oh, there are
I
so many
remember
people
I
on the
asked each
internet
and
that will
every
take
one of
issue
you.
because you're having wrong fun. You're not doing it the
Yeah,
way. That's not how you're supposed to have fun. I'm like, ugh,
Yeah,
it drove
that
me
drives me
nuts. You
nuts.
saw you saw the thread on there. You saw
yeah,
what
they
I
were
said.
awful. Those people were awful. But again, the internet. It's going
Well,
getting
we have the
any.
unfortunate mixture of role playing
Oh,
game nerds and Star Wars nerds
it's
on
just the
those
worst.
forums. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
Well,
the worst.
you know what we ought to do because we're up against it. We're actually blown past it again.
hmm
But you know what we ought to do for next week? I was thinking about this as we were talking about this other nonsense. We should bring up games that probably aren't as well known now, settings that were really good for storytelling and really good for those moments that were memorable. But they're not settings
not
that people
mainstream
might.
settings like the Forgotten
Yeah,
Realms or
yeah. The
So what do
the
you mean,
settings
like
and stuff.
setting? What are you talking about?
Well, if I tell you
like other
now, it's
games
going
and
to
other
ruin it. I'll
settings.
tell you. I'll tell you when we sign off, and then we'll use it as a surprise thing where I say, "Hey, what games do we think worked out?" And then we can bring up the stuff we talked about after we signed off. Now,
Sure.
Perfect, exactly. And we still didn't talk about. I mean, we covered like Games Workshop pricing and redoing the models.
yeah,
But one of the things I've always wanted to cover is like people like to complain about how expensive wargaming is. They're like, "Oh my god, Games Workshop is so expensive," and I'm like, compared to what? You know,
Yeah.
well,
there are a
Drew
lot of
touched
hobbies
on
out there that are way more expensive than wargaming.
Drew touched on a little bit
Put
of
it in
that at the
perspective
beginning. Drew
a
did
little
touch
bit,
on
but
it a little
I don't
bit.
think we jumped into the weeds of what it costs. Like, hey man, you're just getting started in Warhammer and you want to play
Yeah,
a tournament competitive hot meta army, right? Tau's coming out, Eldar's coming out, the new codexes, and if you wanted to go from 0 to 3,000 points, so you got a 2,500 point army with 500 points of sideboard to switch in and out, what's that going to cost you, right? And there's a dollar price on that. I don't know what it is. We have to do some math or whatever, figure out what that is. Okay, what other hobbies cost that same amount of money or more? All right,
all right.
I'll give you a teaser. I used to ride motorcycles, right? I could buy a whole army for the cost of one new tire.
Yes. So, yeah, we need to talk about that. Man, we'll see how much we can get to, but we need to talk about that. I find that one intriguing. I do find that
Could be
intriguing.
good.
And I also wanted to talk about next week about Warhammer Plus, because I know you guys don't have it, but I've been watching that. And it's been a disappointment mostly up to now. But I actually had a couple signs on there this week that gave me hope for what they're doing. So I want to talk about that too. So
Okay.
anyway. All right. Well, thank you guys. That was fun.
Yeah,
It was.
I think we solved a lot of things. I think
it was a thing. We've made the world a better place. I think.
Have
we
we?
have.
Have we?
Have we?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have.
We should think about this. Have
For
we
the
done
6
right
people that
thing?
are going to
now-
listen to this,
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.